Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Gregory, and this is ACC4620 Auditing and Assurance 2. This is part 2 of our chapter 3 in management's responsibilities and the importance of internal control to the external audit. Now, we did cover COSO in part 1, so this is the second part of the chapter. So be sure you read the entire chapter to get all the information. I want to talk about Sarbanes-Oxley. Sarbanes-Oxley was a congressional act that was enacted and implemented in 2002 by two senators, Senator Sarbanes and Senator Oxley, as a result of significant frauds that had been taking place over the last few years before it was enacted. We have three that were very specific that called Congress to the attention of this law. The first one was Enron, and that was the use of questionable accounting practices such as off-balance sheet financing that in the end caused the company to fail, and shareholders lost all their money, retirees lost all their money. Another example that we experienced back then was WorldCom, where WorldCom was inflating their earnings through falsifying revenue to maintain its stock value. And finally, Tyco was a company that failed during a result of a theft of funds straight out from the CEO and the CFO from fraudulent financial transactions. And then they were posting fake transactions and then stealing the money from it. If you're interested, all three of these are really great cases to study about how we came to the point of having the Sarbanes-Oxley Act enacted, or what we call SOX. Now, SOX basically was created to affect only publicly traded companies in the protection of the shareholders and included some areas such as whistleblower protection. But we're now seeing a shift that other industries such as governments and not-for-profit industries are really adopting elements of the SOX Act to benefit and add more credibility and robustness to their financial reporting. I will post this link to the video in your course room so that you can watch a little video on what Sarbanes-Oxley Act is about and why it was put in place. As we cover SOX, this part of the lecture is only going to focus in on management's assertions. In the past, if something went wrong with the financial reports or the financial statement audit, management of companies would often blame the auditor. Well, you failed to find the fraud, or you failed to prevent us from failing. And that's not always the case. So what SOX did is now require management to state in writing that they are responsible for the internal controls of the entity. No longer is the auditor on the hook. It also identifies the benchmark using COSO framework, which we've already covered, for the development and implementation of sound and effective internal controls. And finally, they state, the company states, that there is an effectiveness to the internal controls as of the fiscal reporting. So this is what management must now assert. What the auditor's responsibility is now is to identify the financial reporting risks and the mitigations, evaluate the operating effectiveness of what management's internal controls are, and provide a report, usually as part of the audit, on the effectiveness of those internal controls regarding the financial reporting. So management must assert the auditor tests and provides an evaluation and an opinion on it. Besides having no deficiencies, companies may be found in two different types of deficiencies. One is significant deficiency in the internal controls of the company. The second is the material weaknesses in the internal controls of the company. The difference is in the significant deficiency, there are deficiencies recognized and brought to the attention of management, but they are less than severe. They do not result in a probability of material misstatement of the financial statements. We do bring them to the attention of the management or audit committee, finance committee of the board, because they merit some qualification, some corrective action. But they're not included in management's report on the internal control effectiveness. Material weaknesses, however, are a completely different story. There is a reasonable possibility that there is a material misstatement on the financial statements that will not be prevented or detected on a timely basis. As a result, the auditors cannot conclude that the internal controls that have been put in place by management are therefore effective. Now, what we're saying is that we're not stating that there is a material misstatement in the financial statements, but that there is a reasonable probability that there is. We do have to file a report that describes the material weaknesses, and we usually say what the consequences of those material weaknesses are. And in your text, Exhibit 3.13, there are some great examples, such as a lack of segregation of duties. We have people performing more than one duty in a process, which may create the opportunity for an irregularity to exist. We might have inadequate controls over the computer system. It could be that people are sharing passwords with each other, or that the system is not being properly monitored and could be subject to hacking. We could also have a misapplication of the accounting principles. We're using the wrong accounting principles, or we do not have rationale for the estimates that we make, to the point that those estimates may materially misstate the results of the financial statement. So again, look at your Exhibit 3.13, great examples of material weaknesses. Now, part of our responsibility as an auditor is to plan and assess the risk of our client. We take their assertions, and then we plan and the risk around those assertions being true or false, and then we set up appropriate testing. Now, if it comes to light that we do see something, observe something, look at the transactions and see perhaps unauthorized signatures on purchase orders, if we discover that in the course of our audit work, then we need to test for the assertion that there may be a weakness of internal controls as to who has the appropriate authority to purchase products on behalf of the company. If we find that the assertion is correct, we do need to incorporate it into our financial statement audit. And it's incorporated either as a significant deficiency or a material weakness. Now, in order to do this, auditors, you and I, have to have a good understanding of the client's industry and their environment in order to understand, plan for, and test for these assertions. Under the AICPA Code of Professional Conduct that all CPAs must adhere to, there is a due diligence clause. And that due diligence says, basically, you don't go into an audit without understanding that industry, construction industry, casino industry, banking industry, retail industry. You don't step into that world unless you have a sound understanding of it, and or you bring in professionals that will help you understand it. So it's very important for us to understand what the internal controls are to that industry, to that organization, in the environment that we're working in order to adequately assess whether the internal controls that management is asserting to us are effective and in place. This was a very short lecture. Make sure that you perform all of your diligent reading and ask me any questions, and I'll see you in the classroom.